All right, next topic to look at is absolute value. And we'll start out with absolute value equations. And we'll solve equations that involve absolute value. So just kind of a reminder, absolute value, again, your definition of it is your distance from zero. Okay, now, you may have been told years ago that absolute value is always positive, but never why. And the reason is because it's a distance. Okay, and distance, you talk about how far did you travel. Well, I went 10 miles. Okay, I moved 15 feet. And we cannot go in -8. Okay, somebody will say, well, what if I'm going backwards? Well, now we attach that word backwards and we give a direction that we're going, but we went 8 feet. Okay, so when we talk about absolute value 4, we're saying how far is 4 from 0? Okay, so if we're on the number line, what we're doing is we're simply counting 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. Same idea. How far is -3 from 0? Well, 1, 2, 3 steps. Okay, so pretty simple situation. Okay, but now when we get into an equation, what does it mean when I say the absolute value of x equals 6? And so what we're asking is, what number or numbers are 6 units from 0? So when we think about it on a number line, we're counting how far from 0. So what we're saying is I can go 6 units to the right, or I can go 6 units to the left. Okay? And so if I were to take x equals 6, okay, that's one of my solutions because 6 is 6 units from 0. And if I was supposed to take -6, that's also 6 units from 0. So one of the things about absolute value, when we deal with equations, we generally get 2 solutions because we're talking about the distance from the 0 to the left and the distance from 0 to the right. Okay, so when we solve an absolute value equation, number one, we want to write it in 2 equations. Okay, and then we're going to solve both equations, and again, a reminder is that in general we're going to get 2 solutions. Now, there's a little guide here. Okay, absolute value, and then inside we got some stuff. In this case, it says ax plus b equals c. Okay, now 2 ways we can go about solving it. Okay, what I can do, and this is what the book says, I can take what's inside, because think about our idea of the absolute value of x equals 6. Okay, in one case I got 6. Okay, in the other case I got -6. Okay, we're not going to go about it that way though. Okay, that's how you're taught. You know, the first time you probably saw it and things like that, but that's really not a good way to go about doing it, because once we start getting variables on the outside, okay, things are going to be different. Okay, what we're going to do is instead of taking the opposite here, we're going to take the opposite there. So what I'm in truth doing is I'm multiplying both sides by -1. And the reason we say this is that we're talking about the opposite of x being equal to 6. And when I say the opposite of x equal to 6 and I solve that, what happens is I get -6. Okay, and this is your definition. Okay, what's in parentheses or in the absolute value symbols, in the grouping symbols, either that's 6 units away or the opposite of it is 6 units away. So this is going to be the definition that we're really going to use. And so how I tell people to do this is, number one, take what's on the inside, okay, ax plus b, and set it equal to the outside. That's going to be equation number 1. Equation number 2, what I'm going to do is the opposite of the inside. So the opposite of ax plus b. Now, you're going to get really good at this. You're going to say the opposite of the first part, so the opposite of ax, and then the opposite of the second part, opposite of b. All you're doing is changing your signs. That's going to be equal to the outside. And then we solve those 2 equations. So with this example, here's my insides. 5x minus 10. So my first equation, okay, what's on the inside? 5x minus 10 equal to what's on the outside? Equation number 2. Opposite of what's on the inside. So I'm taking the opposite of the 5x, so I'm changing it to negative 5x. I'm taking the opposite of the negative 10, so it becomes plus 10. And that's still going to be equal to the outside. So the number on the outside is always going to stay the same. That distance is always going to remain what it is. Okay, and that's one of the other things that we want to look at in terms of why we do it this way. We're always saying something's 45 units from 0. Okay, and now we're just going to go in and solve those two equations. So my first one, I'm going to add 10 to both sides. It goes 0. Divide by 5. X equals 11. Over here, subtract your 10. Divide your negative 5. And again, I cross off the negatives because they go to positive. 5s go to 1. Okay. Like I said, in general, 2 solutions. Now, we should check those. If I go back up into my original, 5 times 11, 55, minus 10 is 45. Absolute value is 45. 5 times negative 7 is negative 35, minus 10 is negative 45. Absolute value positive 45. Notice we got that positive 45 in one of the cases inside and the negative 45. Now, the other reason I talk about inside equal outside and opposite of inside equal outside is to help us with this piece. Right now, when I look at this problem, all that stuff right here in the yellow is outside. Okay? There's too many outside pieces. I want to get it so that there's only one thing outside and one thing inside. The one thing inside is not going to be that big a deal. But I want to get so there's only one thing outside. So always get your absolute value alone first before we break it up. So I need to get this absolute value of x minus 2 all by itself. Okay? Think of it this way. 3 times something plus 7 equals 13. Well, it's just like saying, hey, this something is my variable. So what I need to do to get that y by itself is first subtract 7. Okay, so same idea here. I want to subtract 7. I want to get that to go to 0. Then I'd have to come to get that something by itself and divide both sides by 3. Same idea. I'm going to divide by 3. So absolute value of x minus 2 equals 2. That is now the equation that I want to solve. So first equation, inside equals outside. This answer that we get by setting up inside equal outside, nobody ever gets wrong. Okay? Because even if we screw up by not getting my absolute value by itself, okay, what I'm truly doing in this situation is throwing my absolute value signs out of the way. Okay, and changing them really to parentheses. The one we have to be careful of, again, is the second one. Opposite of the inside. So opposite of x, so change the x, opposite of the negative 2. Okay. And now what we do need to really be careful of is when I'm solving this one to make sure we don't lose that minus sign. You know, in this case, it doesn't really affect us because 0 divided by anything becomes 0. But there then are my 2 answers. Okay. Now, go back to the original. Okay. Remember, my solutions were 4 and 0. And check. Okay. Working my order of operations, got to start inside. 4 minus 2 is 2. Absolute value of 2 is 2. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 7 is 13. Go to 0. 0 minus 2, negative 2. Absolute value positive 2 times 3 is 6 plus 7 is 13. Notice what we got inside the absolute value again. We got a 2 and we got a negative 2. Okay. All right. Now, what we'll also run into from time to time is what's called an extraneous solution. What an extraneous solution is you've done everything right, but for some reason, there was something in your process that, was legal, but yet it eliminated one of our solutions. And what it generally happens to be is that with absolute value, sometimes if I get a negative, okay, absolute values can't be equal to a negative. Okay, and so sometimes when we throw some things out, okay, that happens. So you have to really, really check. Okay, and it's a big, big step that we really have to get into checking, especially when I have variables on the outside. Okay, we're good here because my absolute value is all by itself. So number one, inside equals outside. Number two, take the opposite of what's inside. So take the opposite of the 2x, take the opposite of the 12, equals the outside. So there's my two equations to solve. Okay. So again, one of the things I always talk about, again, move your smaller of the two variables since we have variables on both sides. Okay. And my first solution, we get x equals 6. Okay. Now, if I go check 6, 2 times 6 is 12. 12 plus 12 is 24. Absolute value 24 is 24. 4 times 6 is 24. We're good. Okay, that solution worked. Okay. Now, if I go over here, I'm going to add 2x. I'm going to divide by 6. And yes, I solved that equation correctly. Okay. If I go plug negative 2 in here, this becomes negative 4. Negative 4 plus 12 becomes 8. Absolute value of 8 is 8. But when I plug it in out here, I get negative 8. Those aren't equal. This right here is what we call an extraneous solution. Did everything right, but when I went back and plugged it in, it didn't work. And the reason being, again, like I said, is because we get a negative, and on that variable on the outside, okay, makes that outside piece negative, and we can't have an absolute value equal to a negative. Okay. Don't just assume because we get a negative in our solution set that it doesn't work. Okay. It can work, and that's why it's very important to check. Check, check, check all the time. Okay, and you hear me say that always. All right, good luck.